Thanks for joining us at Right On Replicas, where we're proud to bring you the best scale model kit reviews on the planet. Right On Replicas is looking for some qualified builders to be reviewers for our site. If you like to build airplanes and you've got more time than money, send me an email and we'll discuss the details. This review covers the GBZ Super Sportster Air Racer. It's a 1/32 scale Williams Brothers model kit, number 32526. It's been re-released several times, and they're still available on the web, or you can find them available straight from Williams Brothers themselves. Now this kit contains 40 pieces molded in gray and clear, and I would rate it a skill level 4 for intermediate builders, as it requires glue and some intricate paint, as well as some pretty good sized decals. Here are the kit's contents, and some people would call this an open box review. But rather than pick up the sprues and try and describe the parts, I'll just show you how to build the model. We'll be using Model Master's liquid cement, and sometimes super glue for strength, and for clear pieces, white glue or clear parts cement. Here are the decals for this kit. They're very colorful and the registry is good. I would suggest using some of the aftermarket setting solutions to make sure that they adhere to contours and stick well to the body of the plane. The first thing I do is wash the parts in a mild soap detergent and warm water using a toothbrush to make sure there's nothing on it that could contaminate your paint job. Construction starts with the radial engine, so grab these pieces out of the kit and stage them for construction. The first thing that we'll do is glue the center and the rear of the engine together in the pair there, and it looks like this for your subassembly. Looking at the propeller, I noticed that it had a sink mark there near the hub, so I used a little of my favorite putty to fill it in. This brand is Squadron, but there are many brands on the market to use. You'll find that there's some flash around the edges of the cylinders, so clean that off with a hobby knife, and then I sprayed them with some flat black and the crankcase with some neutral gray color. After the filler had dried on the prop hub, I sanded it with some 800 paper first and then finished it off with a 1200 grit to smooth it out. Now the prop was a polished aluminum, so to get that look I used some alclad chrome paint through an airbrush. The first coat was a gloss black, followed by, after it dries, typically overnight, some alclad chrome in some real light coats. Now we can glue the front crankcase and all 9 cylinders in place, and after that dries, I applied a little color wash of black and brown to simulate some oil stains on the crankcase. The push rod tubes on the front of the crankcase had a lot of flash on them, so for accuracy I removed them and replaced them with some .06 brass tubing. To get the black color, I soaked the brass pieces in a product called Blacken It. I then used a product called Micro's Crystal Clear Glue to assemble the spark plug wires that I'd fashioned out of some copper wire, and the push rod tubes to the engine. The exhaust stacks are very small, so I temporarily attached them to a piece of styrene with some clear glue, and I then painted the stacks with some enamel steel color and the ends of the pipes with some flat black. Because the parts are so small, I used some super glue here to attach the exhaust stacks to the engine. Next, I painted the inside of the cowl with some aluminum paint and glued the cowling together around the engine. I filled the seams with some of that putty and masked the engine with Tamiya masking tape and sprayed the engine cowling with some flat black. The engine and cowl are now ready to be installed to the airframe after it is painted. Remove these parts from the sprue tree to start working on the cockpit area, and you'll note that the bulkheads and the seat there have some sinks in them that will need to be filled with some putty and then sanded smooth. I painted the roll cage structure with some of the acrylic chromate green paint from Testers. After filling the sinks and the bulkheads, I decided that they just didn't look quite right. They can't be finished very well. So, just as the original bulkheads were made out of wood, I decided to make them myself. So I glued two pieces of the 0.64-inch plywood together and traced the outline of each bulkhead onto the wood. Following that, I cut, sanded, and drilled the wooden bulkheads to replace the kit's parts. Next, I sprayed the instrument panel with some aluminum color paint. Then after it had dried, I applied the kit's decal. The wood bulkheads were treated with a coat of clear urethane. Paint the throttle, mixture, and trim wheel with some gloss black, and the seat was painted with some aluminum, and then weathered with brown water paints to weather it, so to speak, with a wash. Then everything was glued together using some super glue, and now the cockpit is ready to be installed in the airframe after that is painted. Now gather up the undercarriage parts and then remove them from the tree and trim any flash there. And then glue the tire and the wheel halves together using some of the liquid cement. I then sanded some flat spots on the tires to simulate that there was weight on them, and then painted the tires with some Testers enamel rubber. I finished off the tires by painting the wheel hubs aluminum color. Now locate the sockets there and place the tires and the wheels between the wheel pant halves, and then apply some liquid cement to the wheel pants and set them aside to dry with some clamps. Next we can mask off the tires and then apply some putty to the seams that are created when you put the wheel pant halves together. After that, sand the wheel pants with some 800 and then 1000 grit sandpaper or better, and then apply some primer to them and allow them to dry. I followed this up with a coat of Testers acrylic stoplight red, and after that dried, I cut some thin strips of Tamiya tape and masked off the red stripes that divide the yellow and the black colors. The pattern for the stripe was taken right off of the instruction sheet. With the stripe still in place, I painted the wheel pants a light yellow, acrylic yellow paint. With the stripe masking still in place, I painted the lower section closest to the wheel flat black color and let that dry. And then I removed the masking to reveal the red stripe. And there's a few spots that needed touch up, and I did that with a small paintbrush. After they had dried, I applied a coat of clear coat to the wheel pants, and now they're ready to be installed to the airframe after it is painted. So go ahead at this time and grab the airframe components from the sprue trees and the wing halves, and then glue the wing halves together using some of the liquid cement, and then use some clamps to make sure that they stick together well and don't leave a gap in the wings. I elected to build the GBZ with the larger engine, and so the instructions say to remove the molded in air scoop. I did this using the backside of a number 11 hobby knife blade, making several light passes until the scoop fell off. I dipped the canopy in some future floor polish liquid and then wicked off the excess and let it dry. It makes it more clear and easy to see through. The inside of the fuselage halves were painted with some flat white paint, and then I installed the completed cockpit to the right fuselage half using some super glue. Also, remember to scrape off any paint when you're going to glue surfaces together to make sure that they adhere. Glue the fuselage halves together with some liquid cement, and then hold the pieces together with some small clamps and rubber bands. Glue the wings and the horizontal stabilizers to the fuselage and make sure that they're in good flat plane alignment. Then after they've dried overnight, apply a coat of primer, and this will show where any seams or blemishes need to be repaired. So at this time, use some of the putty and fill anything that you see in the frame of the plane. Now note that I did not fill the seams for the wing roots here because on the real plane the wings are removable for transport, so they would still appear even after the wings are together. After sanding off the filler and smoothing out any of the blemishes from the putty, she was ready to rinse off, air dry, and then coat with another coat of primer. I made a copy of the instruction sheet and used my copy to cut out the templates for the paint job. Along the scallops and edges of the paint there, I painted it with some stoplight red, and after that dried, I cut some really thin strips of Tamiya tape and masked it off where the red stripes divide the yellow and black colors on the fuselage too, just like before. Next, the entire airframe was painted with some acrylic yellow. With the stripes still retaining the masking tape, I painted the front of the airframe with some flat black. Then I removed the masking to reveal the red stripe. There's a few spots again that needed some touch-up with a small paintbrush. I again applied a clear coat to both the engine cowling and to the airframe. You can use just about anything, but for the most part I just used some of the Future floor polish sprayed through an airbrush to give it a thin, clear coat and a slightly shiny surface. Now it's time to apply those decals. The large decals, of course, are going to need a little bit of softening, so use some of that micro scale solvent to help settle that on, and plenty of warm water both to slide the decals off the carrier and onto the airframe. Now you can follow that up with another coat of clear gloss if you like, but you'll have to mask off the flat paint in order to preserve that sheen. The horizontal stabilizer struts, the engine cowl, and undercarriage are now glued to the airframe using super glue, making sure that the parts are all in alignment. Now use some of the clear part cement to apply and install the canopy to the airframe. I used some small diameter music wire for the rigging because they're all straight rig pieces and they fit pretty nicely and stay in place using a little bit of super glue. Well, there you have it. This is an outstanding replica from the heyday of the air race era, and even though it's fairly simple to build, the paint job is the most difficult part, and that's what makes this a skill level for more intermediate builders. But sitting on the weighted tires and waiting for takeoff, it's a stunning example that you can be proud to display on your shelf, and with a few of the little extra fixes that you can detail this kit with, she is a really nice looking model. My hat's off to Williams Brothers for providing these great 1/32 scale racers. Well, there you have it. We hope you've enjoyed this premium scale model kit review from Right On Replicas, and so that you don't miss any more, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. But you can find us on Facebook, and as always at www.rightonreplicas.com. Thanks!